welcome to episode 7 of the Real, Raw and Relevant show with your host. I'm Lockie, and it's a real pleasure. I can see I'm a little bit crooked there. Which way am I going? There we go, my hat's straight now. You can't do a show with a crooked hat, can you? So, hey, if it's your first time with us, we try to keep things pretty relaxed. Thank you so much for joining us. If it is your first time checking out the little show that we have here, looking forward to a good one with you. On this episode, we've got the pleasure of talking with Richard Black, which is really cool. But for a bit of fun before we start, I don't know how you're going with the old mask thing, and you're like me and you're going, you know what, masks, you can't just wear a mask. It's Christmas time, mistletoe and wine, children singing Christian rhymes. Sounds like a song. Anyway, I've got some cool masks and I've been wearing them lately and people love my masks, so maybe you'll love them too. So hopefully these show, I've got, is this going to go in focus? Look, here's my Santi one, my red one, and I change it up and, I'm coming back in focus. And then I have my frosty one. Here's my frosty mask. These are really cool. You've got to get into the Christmas spirit. And here's another one. I haven't worn this one yet. I'm saving. This is my Happy, Happy, Joy, Joy Rudolph mask I've got. I got these from Town Centre Topol. They gave me some for a little project I was working on last week. I might share a little bit more about real soon. So there you go. I don't know what masks you've got. Share your masks around. Come on, wear something different. Don't wear those boring blue ones. Get a Christmas mask or do something different. Hey, if you like what we're doing here and you haven't done it before, please make sure you like, share, comment, say hello in the comments section below. It'd be really, really cool. And if you have any questions, especially around the topic, when our guest is speaking, throw your comments in the comments section. We'd love to get your feedback. If you've got any questions or something you just want some clarification on, we'd love to get your feedback. But please make sure you like, share, comment, share this around if you think it's going to be helpful for someone else as well. And again, if you're ever wondering how you can support the show, actually like, share and comment. That actually makes the world of difference and get the word out there. But if you'd like to help a little bit financially, we have a thing called Buy Me a Coffee. I'll put the link again like I normally do in the comments a little bit later. buymeacoffee.com/Lockie, and it's like you're buying me a virtual coffee. For as little as $3 you can help support the show, which is really, really appreciated. So I'm going to be back real soon. We're going to do a bit of an intro about what we're going to be talking about, and I'll be introducing our special guest. So I'll see you in a second. Part of my motivation for doing this show was I wanted to talk about things that were obviously, as the title suggests, very real, raw and relevant to all of us, but it has to be real, raw and relevant to me because otherwise what's the point of me trying to even seem like I know something about it or, present it to you. So in that vein, one of the first shows, or it's actually the second show that we did, was with a guest called Susie McAlpine, and we talked about burnout. And if you haven't caught that show, again, we'll put a link to that in the notes later on for you. But she wrote a book called Beyond Burnout, and it was the first book that I read after I found out that I was burnt out and wanted to figure out, well, what are my next steps? And it was so helpful to me. It was really, really practical. And it actually is, I would recommend it as a book for anybody from any industry or stage or career or whatever you're doing. It's not a pastor's book. It's not a layperson's book. It's for everybody. And yes, there is business concepts in it, but you can park that to one side and just dig deep into the great stuff that she shares. But one of the things that she really helpfully did was we wanted a definition of what burnout actually is. I'm going to chuck it on the screen for you here now. What is burnout? So I just want to clarify this before we dive into our interview so you kind of get a feel for where I'm coming from and where we're going with the show tonight. So what is burnout? This is from the World Health Organization. They came up with this definition not so long ago, and Susie introduced it to me, and this is straight from their website. Burnout is feelings of energy depletion or exhaustion. And by that, it means like you just feel so completely worn out that even when you take a break, have a holiday, you don't feel any better than what you did than when you started on the holiday. Or you have the weekend and by Monday morning you're dreading going back to work, that kind of thing. The second one of the definition is increased mental distance from one's jobs or feelings of negativity. I can't even say that word. Negativism, you can read it, or cynicism related to one's job. Now, what that essentially means is you will possibly have others that have noticed that your attitude to the role that you're in or life in general has kind of changed. And if you're just getting more and more cynical, more and more maybe even bitter about what's going on in your life, that could be an indication that you're experiencing burnout to some degree. And the final one there is reduced professional efficacy, which sounds very doctorish, but the way that I interpret that is very simply, if it takes you twice as long to do a task that you used to do before, if it just wears you out doing the most simple things that you used to do in a role or a job, then maybe along with those other symptoms or issues, you might be facing the issue of burnout. And when I read those and learned about those, I went, that helps actually explain how I was feeling last year. From August onwards, I began this journey last year. I'm a lot better than, like I keep saying, I'm a lot better than what I was. I've still got a wee way to go, and that's all okay. I'm just really grateful that I'm in a place now where I can start to get help and get healing and all the good things that come with trying to recover from a mental issue like what burnout actually is. And the reason why I wanted to bring that all up, because I'm wanting to revisit the topic. I want to revisit from a slightly different angle the issues around burnout. And that's why we have our guest tonight, Richard Black. Here's a cool little picture that was part of it. I'll go the right way. A bit of a blurb that we did. So this is what we're doing. We're kind of revisiting burnout. Plus we want to talk about this thing called emotional intelligence. Now, more on that real soon. Now, before we dive into this interview, I just want to give you a bit of a heads up. Yes, it's pre-recorded. But it also, it's very much focused on an article that I read that he'd written a number of years ago. It talks about pastors and that why they might be more susceptible to burnout than they might realize. And he had 4 different amazing key points that I wanted to dig into with him. And so our 2-page article that he wrote kind of gets all expanded in this interview. And I really hope no matter what world you come from, whether you're a pastor, a leader, you're flipping burgers, whatever you're doing, I'm hoping you can get something out of this. And again, I just want to mention there's going to be elements of faith mentioned in there. It's not all the way through the interview, but it is important because especially when we're referring to pastors, they're in the faith business, they're sharing their heart and about God and those different, all good things. But I want you to dig deep into this and go, hey, what can I learn from this for yourself? After the interview, stick around. This is the last bit I'm going to say before we just roll the interview for you. Is I'm going to do a real brief wrap up and let you know what's happening for our final show, which is on my calendar. It says the 22nd of December. It is going to have a different theme. So I want you to look forward to that. It'll be really, really cool. So enough of me talking. Let's get to our interview now with Richard Black. Sit back, enjoy, take some notes, and I'll be back with you, just you and me, real soon. Now, please leave comments if you have something you want to say during the show, watching the interview, fire it in those comments there. We'd love to get your feedback. So, hey, see you again real soon. Well, joining me now on the Real, Raw and Relevant show, it's my pleasure to welcome our guest, Richard Black, who's a counsellor and director of Mind Health in Christchurch. Welcome to the show, Richard.
Kia ora. It's great to be with you.
Now, to help us all, I mean, I've read a bit about you on your website. How about you tell us what you do? I know I've said you're a counsellor, but how about you explain what your life looks like? What do you do in this space?
Yeah, so I'm a counsellor and I'm the director of Mind Health. So I look after a team here of counsellors, coaches, supervisors, and we run a variety of different training events as well. I mean, pretty much our aim, our heartbeat is we want to enhance the well-being and resilience of our 5 million people. We want to provide mental health tools that are accessible to people that they can implement in their own life to strengthen and enhance their overall well-being and resilience. So we work with businesses, we work with schools, we work with not-for-profits, churches, and we also do individual and couple and children counseling as well. We do quite a lot in this area of just helping people uh, to increase their well-being and to be able to succeed with this life that they've been given.
Fantastic. Now, the reason why I wanted to talk to you was you wrote a paper, a piece of work a few years ago now, and someone that I know from Christchurch shared it in a group that I'm connected with on Facebook, and I had a bit of a read of it, and it was called Toxic Factors in a Pastor's Role. And as I read through it, I recognise it kind of ties in really nicely with a conversation we've been having around burnout and how to recognise it, how to deal with it, and all this sort of stuff. And that's why I was really keen to talk to you, because I want to explore some of the things you bring up on it, because there's words and phrases that are getting thrown around in the mental health space a lot. But for one, I don't know what they mean most of the time, and I thought it'd be really good to talk to you. I'll just read out, and I'll put it on the screen for everybody, something that you put in this article, Toxic Factors in a Pastor's Role, and ask you just to talk a bit about it. It says, one research paper showed that emotional intelligence of church leaders decreased the longer they were in ministry. This is staggering when you consider the implications of it. Another comparative study that examined emotional intelligence of different professions showed that church leaders had an equivalent emotional intelligence to those in addiction recovery. Now, I gotta ask, what on earth is emotional intelligence? Let's just start there, and then we can unpack the rest of that.
Yeah, so just as a bit of background, that article was an article I pulled together out of my master's research on emotional health in the role of a church leader.
Okay.
And so we were talking about emotional health, but it's operationalized as emotional intelligence in the way that we'll often understand it or talk about it within society. And so emotional intelligence in many ways is simply your awareness and your ability to manage emotional states, both your own and with others. So people will categorize it, quantify it in different ways. But if we look at it as four distinct parts, my ability to be aware of my own emotions, to be able to name those emotions, to know why those emotions are there, and my ability to be able to regulate my emotions. Can I self-soothe? Can I calm myself down? Can I access emotional states that I'm needing and that seem to be appropriate for a context? But then there's also the other people's side, the social side. Can I be aware of what someone else is feeling? Can I identify with that feeling? So we'll often refer to that as empathy. But also, can I work with another person's feeling state for mutual benefit, whether it's the ability to help somebody dial down, calm down, or the ability to work through someone's agitation so that we can negotiate to a better way of being. So, in one sense, it's around emotional literacy and emotional mastery, both for self and with others.
Okay, so you've brought up this emotional intelligence thing, and it looks like, if I as bluntly as I've read it out, that pastors and people who are involved with dealing with people, there's this whole thing of their emotional intelligence, and we've been talking about burnout. So how do those two things link together? Is the burnout component a lack of understanding about your emotional intelligence? Is emotional intelligence and handling that better a better way of navigating not getting burnt out? How could we talk about that?
Yeah, and it is recognizing that there is certainly a connection here between them. One of the things that I discovered when I did the research is that it's not that church leaders have a lower than average emotional intelligence, not when they get into this business, this game of being in the people business. But what's the way the role is constructed, the way a person understands themselves in the role, that is what is putting pressure, needless pressure on church leaders. I mean, when I discovered that the emotional intelligence of a church leader decreases the longer you're in ministry, you look at that and you think, who wants to sign up for this? Who wants to move into this field? Or
Sure. Yeah.
that emotional intelligence in pastors is comparable to those in addiction recovery. And it's important to realize these were specific research done. This isn't a large longitudinal study with great in-depth research behind that. So we do need to take this somewhat with a grain of salt. But the thing to recognize in that is something's going on that people are unaware of.
Mm.
Now, when it comes to burnout, in one regard, what is burnout? Burnout is the complete emotional, mental exhaustion of a person that has physical ramification, has mental emotional ramifications, relational ramifications, and so forth. And so if your emotional intelligence is being eroded, then you're less likely to be aware of those indication emotions that are saying, hey, you're not coping well, you're not
Mm.
doing well, things are not going well for you. You need to stop and do a reality check. And so one of the things that I'll find when I'm working with church leaders who are in brownout or they're heading towards burnout, that they honestly cannot see that they're not coping well. But when I'll ask them a simple question like, if I was to ask your body how you're doing, what would your body say? And they might say, oh, I'm tired. I'm worn out. I don't want to get out of bed. I just want to stare out the window. Right. So if we asked your body about what emotional state you're in right now, or what needs to happen, what would it say? They've shut off listening to their body or listening to their own emotional state, that they're continuing to bleed out emotional energy, to be worn down. And because they're not aware of it, it just keeps eroding them more and more and more until they end up in burnout.
Now, you brought up, it's something that's come up for me, and I've heard it so many times. I think I didn't know I was burnt out, but I kind of did, but I didn't, if that makes some sense. It took a friend of mine who came to visit me middle of last year, not during a lockdown, so people don't freak out and send me hate mail, who sat down and said to me, hey, Lockie, I want to let you know I think you're burnt out. And at that moment, I felt like I was burnt out. And it wasn't because it was the power of suggestion. It just opened it up for me. And because and I think this is where pastors get stuck. You're so focused on trying to help as many people as you can. You want to, for want of a better phrase, keep everybody happy, because that's the pressure you feel sometimes as a leader. You're trying to do all these things, you're trying to serve, because that's what we want to do, that you put yourself on the back burner. So you've mentioned about this emotional intelligence. You helped unpack it a little bit. My burning question stuck in my brain right now is, how do you actually start to develop emotional intelligence? No one here, I think, is looking for the magic bullet. Hey, give me 3 points and I'll know it by the end of the show. But if someone's wanting to learn about emotional intelligence in their own life, what would be the next step for them right now, do you think?
Because I think if you want to learn about emotional intelligence, we can do it in a kind of 3-step process, or we can look a lot deeper and understand more of the dynamics and the drivers that are going on that cause you to be the way you are. Because you talked about how, as a church leader, you can get so focused on helping people. But what I want people to start to pick up on is, yes, but why are you having to help people? Of course, you're in the business of helping people, but if you were to stop helping people, what emotions start to surface? So if we want to take a kind of 1, 2, 3 step, the first thing that I'd get people to do is just periodically throughout the day, stop yourself and ask, if I was being completely honest right now, what am I feeling? What's going through my mind? What am I agitated, happy, sad, mad about, if we take those very simple words? So you begin to tune in to listening to your own emotional state. What you can then go on to do later on is you can take some more generalized language like I don't feel good or I feel fine, and be able to put more refined words on it. But starting by asking yourself, if I was truly honest right now, what am I feeling? And if you struggle to access feelings, then ask yourself to begin with, what am I thinking? And what would those thoughts suggest as to what I'm feeling? But if we're going to really go into a deeper place to help leaders build resilience, then we need to come to a different feeling state that most people have organized their life so they never feel it. But church
Mm.
leaders will often find they're getting pressed up against it. When you do certain things that you feel pressured to do, that you feel like you have to do, stop and ask yourself, if I stopped doing this, if I stopped helping people, if I stopped keeping people happy with me, what feeling would come up that I
Mm.
would hate to feel? Or if I asked myself, what would that uncomfortable feeling want to say? What would it communicate? Because you see, there's usually some emotional allergies or bullying emotions that we're unconscious of that drive us into behaviors that are unhealthy and unhelpful.
Okay. Yeah.
And of course, you can put a nice coating on it to say, well, I'm here to help people. I'm here to serve. It's other people's needs before mine. But when you start to ask a question, what feeling would emerge? What we discover is there's actually a feeling state that's causing you to have to help people, have to keep people happy with you, have to keep putting in more of those hours. Because if I don't, I will be terrorized by feeling states around things like I just feel like you talked about before with me, that I feel like a failure, I feel
Mm.
inadequate, or I feel rejected, or I feel in the state that people are abandoning me. Things that can be terrifying for others. But of course, all of this is below the surface. And that's what we need to start to reveal. What are, in fact, the hidden drivers that are causing you to have to overfunction and begin to burn yourself out?
Now, you said a phrase. I like writing notes when people are talking because you guys, everyone I've been interviewing is just amazing. I'm learning so much from. You talked about tuning in. I thought for me that was important because during the day, no matter what you're doing, you can be so focused on task, what you've got to get done, your responsibilities you have. And many people, I think maybe we oscillate a little bit. Maybe I'm sort of pontificating all over the place here. Many of us are over tuned in, and that's not going to help. But a lot of us who end up burned out, we're never tuned into what's going on the inside of us because we're so focused on task, don't want to let people down, you're battling guilt, what you got to do, you ignore all your emotions. Those things are dangerous. They'll just lead you into weeping in the corner like some weirdo or something. And so you just, no, I'm going to do this thing. And I guess in a faith environment, we can ignore our emotions to our detriment because we've got this task. We want to not let anyone down. We don't even want to let God down. So you just go hard out and then you end up in a big mess anyway. So would it be right just to encourage people, a great next step would be, hey, just in your own heart, wherever you are, not in front of everybody, just do what you talked about. Ask those questions of yourself about why you're doing
Yeah.
it and what's your big great next step for someone, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it really is. And the asking of yourself, why am I doing this? What I find is that people will give the surface answer
Oh
first,
yeah.
such
Yep.
as I'm here to serve people.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not until I ask a question that puts them in an emotionally difficult place that they start to reveal what's going on. Like if you stopped helping people, what would actually be so bad about that for you? Now, not
Mm.
logically, but emotionally. What would the sense be that would be uncomfortable, or even what might I be fearful of? You see, when it comes to our emotional state, one of the things that I'll find is that we have a tendency to fall into one or other pitfall in the extreme. So, what you're talking about here is that down one end of the spectrum, people can learn to deny their feelings. That they in fact they build a wall between them and feeling anything. So, you can poke me and prod me, but I'm pretty much numb from the head down. And that is because things like don't trust an emotion, emotions lie to you. We don't want to be led by our emotions.
Mm.
And I get some of that understanding. But emotions can be scary. So let's not go there. Let's dig deep. Let's overcome. Let's persevere.
Mm.
But down the other end of the spectrum is where people get caught so much in listening to and living in their emotions that they're marinating in their emotional state. They're indulging their emotional state.
Mm,
And I'm not saying that in any kind of judgmental way. It's just that's what they're soaking in. And so they feel their feelings, they explore every feeling, they talk to people about the nuances of all their feelings, but they stay put in those feelings that aren't always helping them.
mm,
Where we want to get to is a healthy middle ground of where we start by being honest.
that's good. Yeah.
Honest with what I am feeling, I am thinking, honest with those emotions which I don't want to admit. I'm actually really angry at certain people when I'm supposed to be the kind, nice person.
Mm.
I'm feeling aggrieved. I'm feeling jealous or envious. I'm feeling frustrated, hacked off, or that state that I'm in. Let's start by being honest, not because we're going to leave you soaking in it down one end, and not because we want you now to shut the door and pretend you don't feel it, but we have to be honest before we can regulate. I'll often say to people, if you want to move on from where you are, you first of all got to be honest about your location.
Mm.
So let's discover where you are so that we can then work out, what do I want to do with this emotion? Is this emotional state healthy? Is this helping me? Or do I need to do something else with it? So, absolutely what you're saying. Let's stay put with tuning in and start by being honest.
And look, this is part of this dilemma as we bring up these great things for people to do, and I would encourage people to explore it carefully. Hopefully, I can say that, not conservatively, just carefully. Find some people that you can actually be honest with. Being honest with yourself in a journal might be a great place to start. But I was telling Richard before the interview recently about getting together with a whole bunch of other leaders, and we did an overnight, and everyone was all, hey, how you going? Oh, I'm awesome, and it's all great, and we hung out with us in the hot pools and had a nice dinner, but by the next day we sat in a group, everyone sits in a circle. It's just always weird, but we do that, and one by one everybody was going around the circle saying how miserable they were, and to the person next to them they're going, but why are you so miserable? Because you're doing such an amazing job. And that kind of leads me a little bit from what we're talking about into another question I had about that you identified in this document that you wrote about this pull for perfection, this drive to show everybody how amazing you are, and the social media angst that we all have these days. And as churches and as leaders, we've all dived into that world as well of posting the best of what's going on in our church life and personal life on Instagram and Facebook. And I don't have all the answers. That's why I'm talking to you about this. What do we do about this? Where do we get the balance in showing people what's going great, but being honest? Look, I don't know. Can you please help me out on this one? I don't know how to answer this whole drive to perfection thing. What do we do?
You see, part of that is we need to rehumanize the role.
Mm-hmm.
That one of the things that in my research many church leaders said is that they felt like they were in a fishbowl where everyone was watching them and everyone was judging how they were with their spouse, how they were with their children, how they were in interactions with difficult people. So they felt like, whether it was said explicitly or not, that I feel like I have to be perfect here. And this is one of the things that bleeds us of emotional energy, because there's a dynamic in this called emotional labor, which
Right.
in one sense is the distance between what I'm presenting and what's really going on in me. That distance, the greater the distance, the more emotional energy that I have to use up in order to appear a certain way.
Okay.
And so, of course, many church leaders are posting themselves on Instagram. They feel like they need to present in a certain way. We've all got to be wearing matching denim, and we've all got to have smiles and have, high definition pictures that are taken of us eating wonderful meals. And here are all of our children, and they're all named after a minor prophet. And you see, part of this is it's around meeting deep needs that feel like they've been unmet. This is around, and this connects with a number of the other points that were putting pressures on church leaders, of what do I define, not logically, not even theologically, but emotionally, what do I define as success? what makes me successful? And by and large, the sense of success speaks to two very deep core needs that we have. A need to know that I belong, that I'm accepted and acceptable, and another deep need to know that I'm significant, that I'm worthwhile, that I'm adequate.
Mm-hmm.
And so I have to work out what are the rules here in this group of people that communicate to me that I'm a success, that I'm significant, and that I'm acceptable. And of course, within a kind of church setting where you're supposed to be this great spiritual leader, you're not supposed to ever be human and get upset and have a
Mm,
bad hair day or get grumpy with people or have a tiff with your spouse or get sort of frustrated with your kids. You're not supposed to do any of that. You're
mm,
supposed to sort of be in this pedestal where you're just sort of um, surfacing, sort of skimming the ground where your feet aren't even touching the ground. This is what you're supposed to be if you were really a good leader. And of
mm.
course, that's impossible. That's not realistic. That's not human. Church leaders are humans who have been called into a role to lead people. They'll have certain gifts and certain abilities, but it doesn't stop them from being human. So we need to rehumanize the role, and we need leaders to give themselves permission to be human.
Mm.
In fact, some of the leaders that were exhibiting greater resilience in my research were the ones that went, hey, look, this is just who I am. Take it or leave it.
Mm.
You know, my wife and I, my husband and I, we get grumpy with each other from time to time. It's just who we are. It's not the end of our marriage. We work through it. My kids frustrate me. It's just who I am. I'm not going to pretend to be something I'm not. And so they had a greater resilience, but that also was because there was a greater sense of security, of confidence in themselves around who they are
Right.
and around what they could define as success.
Okay, so you just brought up about these issues of projection. How are you going to present yourself to the world? That's where we start from, the whole social media thing, and people's expectations of you. So words that have been thrown around the last, I suppose, 5, 6, 7 years is, transparency as a leader, which I've found is an absolute minefield because what's you think is an appropriate level of transparency to one person it's too much and to someone else it's not enough. It never goes anywhere. But you've brought it back to, well, you need to know who you are, already made some firm decisions in your own heart, mind, soul, whatever it is, of how you're going to present yourself to everybody aside from all the pressure that comes on you. Because again, a lot of people look to you as a leader, as an example, and that's the level that you're going to go to. So if you dare tell everybody you're not perfect, does that give them permission to not try? There's a million things I could say around all this sort of stuff.
Yeah.
But again, it's this whole thing of trying to explore that and at least have the conversation with somebody around it. Would that be a fair way of assessing this? As opposed to, hey, make sure you know who you are, and then everyone's going, oh, okay, what do I do with that now? So, yeah.
Well, part of it is what if you have a conversation with someone else, it could still become a bit self-referential
Mm,
and you could end up in the same place. What I often find is that people know the truth for somebody else and not for
okay,
themselves.
yeah, that's true.
So
Yeah.
it's thinking it through. What would actually, if I was flipped around, if I was a person in the church and not the church leader, what would I perceive to be acceptable for the way a church leader presents themselves? And oftentimes, not always, but oftentimes we'll have a much better sense if we were thinking about it from somebody else. Who else is allowed to be human? Well, actually, everyone else in the congregation is allowed to be human, so am I.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that doesn't mean that I'm going to give myself permission to carry on with bad behavior. It's what you were talking about before, one of the buzzwords, transparency. Yeah, but what does that mean? We've also got other buzzwords here like authenticity, which
Mm,
I like as well, but I'll talk about it as rehumanizing the role.
okay.
Another word that's used here is vulnerability. But the thing is, it's not an either or. This is a continuum, and we need to learn wise vulnerability where I can wisely reveal who I am. And part of it is to recognize what's the outcome of this. Is the outcome of not doing this that I'm setting myself up to sort of hold everything in, or am I giving myself permission where I can be absolutely horrible to someone and I'm just saying, hey, I'm just being human?
Mm.
Either way, extremes is not helpful here. So we need to bring it back to, what does wise transparency, wise vulnerability look like or sound like? And in it, we'll often know it when we think about it from the point of view of somebody else. If I was to talk to another church leader, what would I say is acceptable for the way that they are? If I was to, in fact, be someone in the church and not the leader, what would I think and what would I find as a breath of fresh air coming from the leader? What would I think is appropriate and not appropriate? So, again, with that word of tuning in, it's about refining our understanding. Moving out of it has to be one or the other, and understanding the nuances, but that's something we learn. And certainly having a trusted coach or supervisor
Okay.
to help you do that would be a great first step.
I love that you brought that up. It came up the other day when I was talking to someone on the show about counsellors, and I relate a story about years ago when I was offered a supervisory counsellor. Of course, I told the story about how uncomfortable I was because I didn't think I needed counselling. But the thing that I came to learn from that experience was I loved that every month I had that one person I could go talk to about anything, and they made great coffee, and so that really helped. It was a twofer really at the end of the day. Brilliant counsellor. I don't know if he's still doing it. A guy called Richard Charmley in Auckland. Hi Richard, if you ever see this, thank you so much for everything you did. Now, so having those people to bounce off is a really good thing, which leads, again, you're segueing all this for me so well, probably because you wrote this, but there's this something you brought up in the article as well about the issue of isolation. And I don't know how many pastors and leaders in roles that are similar that I've met, including myself, who, while you are surrounded by so many people and so much interaction, you're so desperately lonely and you feel a bit stuck, but there's no way out, which is the feeling stuck part. So how, if someone's feeling very isolated in the role and not quite sure who to talk to, how do you start to begin to build out of that sense of isolation so that burnout doesn't keep knocking on the door of your life?
Yeah, and that's a great question. Because the irony is, church leaders are surrounded by people, but they feel incredibly lonely and isolated.
Mm.
And that often has to do with the fact that there are these internal pressures that I don't quite know what to do with, that I can't tell my congregation and I can't tell my denominational leaders because, they may think poorly of me. And I certainly can't tell another church leader, because one of the horrible things they said is, despite what I want to say here, they're in fact my competition. So I
Mm.
feel absolutely stuck. So finding a safe person. Now, that's what I get the advantage of being a supervisor to many church leaders, that I create that safe place. If you've got somebody else who is a safe person who knows how to help you unpack what's going on for you, then start talking with that person, because that's the thing that's often missing.
Mm.
The people that I'm surrounded by, if I'm the church leader, my people in my church denominational leaders, my other fellow church leaders, they don't feel like safe people, at least in my head, because of the internal emotional pressures I'm putting on myself.
Mm.
So finding a place where do I feel like it will be a safe place where I can share, I can say anything. People aren't going to fire me. They're not going to think that I'm nuts. I can talk about God's spirituality and they don't think I've got a mental health condition.
Mm.
But finding a safe place like that, and with supervisors and professional supervisors, professional counselors, we're bound by confidentiality unless you're going to say that you're going to hurt yourself or hurt other people. So it's a safe place where church leaders can be real, and they can start to process what's in me, what's going on here, that where they know they're not going to be judged. So finding that trustworthy person is a brilliant first step to overcoming isolation. Then it's about building friendships,
Mm.
genuine friendships, again with trustworthy people, and then knowing how to navigate the other relationships you have, where you'll often be wearing more than one hat
That's
with
right.
these people, and knowing how to navigate that.
Yeah, I look back now on my experiences over the last few years, and I'm not beating myself up all the time about it. But one of the things I probably should have pushed for is having someone else to talk to. Not for because I had these deep-seated issues that I was trying to hide or anything along those lines, but just to try and avoid getting into the mess in my own heart and life that I got into in regards to ending up burning out. I could have possibly avoided that if I had someone else to talk to. And getting away from that isolation thing, and then again, I loved everything you wrote in this article. That's why I'm hammering on about it. Everyone's probably going, "What is this article? What is it?" But you're getting all the best bits out of this. Trust me. You see, one of the other issues that people struggle with is over-identification with a role, which, look, as a pastor, as a leader, you are 100%. You can't do the role unless you are all in. It's not like, hey, I get paid for 40 hours of pastoring, so therefore I'm going to go do that. It's all encompassing. You don't think about much else. I don't know many other pastors who have lots of different hobbies or things that they do. People look at you weird if you have hobbies. I know I got into multi-sport for a period of time. I know I don't look it, but I got into multi-sport for a period of time, and I look back now and go, that was so good for me because I had a different outlet to pour my passion and enthusiasm and, whatever it is into it. So again, maybe I've just helped answer my own question. How do pastors get that balance right of you need to be passionate about your role, but don't kind of over-identify with it and cause yourself some problems?
Yeah, yeah. And what I discovered is I would suggest this is the linchpin that's holding all of the other pressures together.
Okay.
Is this over identification with the role? It is so significant because what happens is there's a difference between committing my energy and my time to something and needing something that completes or answers unfinished business in me. That's part
Mm,
of my identity. You see, the way that I talk with church leaders is I'll say, and interestingly, when I was talking with CEOs, they were saying, this is pretty much the same for us as well.
right.
Is that in ministry that you're doing, there are three distinct parts to who you are within that area. I say, let's think of it like this. There is the me part. Now, the me part is who I am. And if we're thinking about you in a church, in a Christian setting, that you have been dreamed up by God, that you have been saved by Him, that you are loved by Him. And in the me part, where God wants you, full stop, that really your sole purpose here is to allow God to love you and to love Him back.
Hmm.
And because He's created you and because He loves you, there's this. The next thing He does is He wants to gift you and He wants to put a purpose in your heart. And so this is the area that we'll often refer to as calling or passion.
Hmm.
And it's the stirring in you to willing to work for His good pleasure. What is it that I want to be about, that I want to achieve? And, I want to see people encounter the grace of Jesus. I want to make a difference in my community. I want to see lives transformed, people may say. And then there's this third area. That's the role. Now, the role is the concrete expression of what you do. And the role is that you are the senior pastor of this Baptist church, or you're the vicar of that church, or you're the pastor of this Baptist church, whatever it may be. And there may be, hopefully, a job description that goes with that. The thing is, that's a concrete expression of what you do. And many church leaders think that's who I am.
Mm,
And it's not.
yeah.
Because what church leaders will do is they'll take the me, the calling, and the role, and they'll mush them together. And then whatever I perceive to be success in the role, the numbers are growing, the income's doing well, our youth ministry is going ahead, great guns, whatever it may be. If that is doing well, then the me part feels okay. I feel significant. I feel worthwhile. I feel like I'm okay. But if the success factors in the role, however you define that emotionally, not logically or theologically, that I feel like I'm not succeeding in. People are upset with me. People are angry with me. I'm not keeping people happy. The church isn't growing. The income's dropping down. We're losing key people. Well, then all of a sudden I feel worthless. I feel useless. I feel like a failure, inadequacy, and that's horrible. And so the thing that we have to start with church leaders that I do is we need to separate out these three. That your role is what you do, it's not who you are. And
good,
if
Richard.
that role failed, if you got fired from your role, your calling goes nowhere. And in fact, who you are in Christ, your identity never alters. So we need to learn how to minister out of my identity and who I am, minister towards my calling, this passion, this purpose that's in me, and minister in accordance with the role. So that we recognize you have never been the role. But when you start to say, but I am the pastor, the senior leader of this church, and I therefore need to be a success in order to be okay, you will set yourself up for mental emotional damage. You are going to be mentally emotionally vulnerable. And this is one of the reasons why church leaders are mentally and emotionally perhaps more vulnerable and susceptible to mental distress than anyone in the general public, because they've hooked their internal state to these concrete things. And of course, the irony is some of those success factors, the church is growing, the youth ministry is booming, income is increasing, they're actually beyond your direct control. So, which is why church leaders will often be spinning their wheels and pouring in so much energy and time to try to make an influence and a difference down this end. But of course, it's actually beyond your control. And when you try to control things that are beyond your control, all you're going to do is stress yourself out and wind yourself up. So we need to help church leaders recognize why being the leader of this church is not who I am, it's what I do. And we do that by helping church leaders get very clear about what their passion and their calling actually is. And that can find expression in a number of different roles. And centering themselves more than just intellectually or theologically, but centering themselves in an experiential way in actually who I really am in God. That some of those questions about am I lovable, am I significant, am I worthwhile, they've already been answered. And so we need to help people to access at an experienced level how it's really been answered. And when that happens, a person becomes centered. They grow in their internal confidence, and they no longer need the role to answer and finish their unfinished business.
Everything you're bringing up, if I and actually I might do this in the future, I might just cut this part of the interview and throw it at a bunch of pastor friends, because I'm bluntly talking about ministry, pastoring, faith, all that sort of stuff right now, because it's so pivotal. And I learned this the hard way. Get burned out. You've had to step down from your church. Now you find out what on earth is going on in your own life, because my role actually was my identity. And we have this tension. As someone in faith, you make a decision to follow Jesus, you start going on to a church, you get involved. I just was like a lot of other people. I served on a worship team playing guitar, got involved with youth ministry. There's basically every different role in a church I've basically done. And you've reached the pinnacle. Like you're now the pastor. Like if it's the ultimate tick that you've made it on some level. And when that gets taken away, you go, who am I? But it's so dangerous, isn't it? Because I'm more than all those little sequential roles that I was in. You haven't made it to some pinnacle. I'm still alive. I'm still me. I've still got to figure out who I am and my role in this world and all that sort of stuff. And it's so dangerous when the role dictates everything else about your lives. And it scares me that probably, if I'm being honest, I think a lot of pastors and leaders really struggle with this. Their role is everything. It's your justification for getting paid. It's your justification for being on this earth. And maybe it's the real challenging question that they need to talk with somebody else about.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And you've been conditioned to be this way. You were set up. Now, no one did this intentionally. It's certainly nothing of what we want to do. But like what you just told me about how you've, been in the worship band, you've been in these different areas of ministry, this is where there's a confusion. When people start off and they encounter the reality of Jesus and they say, hey, actually, I want you. I want to follow you. What happens in a church setting, though, that is close, but it's not, is you don't get helped to be a disciple of Jesus. You get conditioned to be an organizational disciple.
Okay.
So you come into a small group. It's great. Now let's help you to become that small group leader. And now let's help you move on and be overseeing all these different small group leaders. And now, or let's put you in a different ministry of worship or with youth. And now you're going to move your way up that rank. And so the assumption is that moving up your areas of leadership is increasing in your discipleship. It's not. It's organizational discipleship. Now, hopefully someone's being a disciple of Jesus through that. But this is the mistake. What this also then means in the church is if the pinnacle is to be the church leader, it means that everybody else is somehow, or their faith, their spirituality, their following of Jesus is somehow substandard. It's not the pinnacle. Now, we don't want to say that. We're not meaning to say that. It's just the system has shaped us and has blinded us, and it's actually unhealthy and unhelpful. And it's not what we wanted in the first place.
No, and I don't think everyone goes into this and that's their intention. I don't think most leaders are wanting to be that way, just so focused on, here we are, back on task again. Got to get people in roles, and I think, like, can I tie this a little bit into the other part of the rest of the world? Of people in the corporate world, and you've worked your way up from, maybe you worked in the warehouse, and now you've got to be the salesperson and sales manager, and worked your way up. You're the CEO, and again, this whole focus on getting people to do tasks, and then we wonder why people's lives fall apart behind the scenes, when really who we are behind the scenes is actually more about who we are than the role we're in. So I know there'll be some people watching this who are going, oh my gosh, why are we talking so much about church and Jesus and faith and bits and pieces? I want you to understand that we're talking focus on this group that we're maybe a little bit giving a hard time in a good way to. But this also, I hope you can find something in this that applies to your life and the work that you're involved in, that you actually are more than the role you're in. And it's such an important part of our humanity that I guess we have to all wrestle with and all come to some understanding on some level at some really important time of our lives. Otherwise, it can catch us out.
Absolutely, because it's recognizing there's nothing wrong with having goals and wanting to achieve and wanting to face another challenge and seeing yourself progress. That's fine. It's recognizing the difference between that and who I am and my identity. Because, of course, if you're in the corporate world and you've moved your way up and now you're a team leader, a manager, a director of a company, well, great achievement, go you. But if that then stops, if you get fired, ousted, if you retire, well, then who are you now? We want to make sure that you've cultivated and developed your identity and your sense of self that goes beyond the role that you're doing. And it's coming back to that phrase I've been saying, the role is what I do, but it's not who I am.
That's good.
So that when I do the role out of who I am, when I know who I am and now I go to work, I'm going to feel more energized. People are going to experience a better version of me. But if I go to work to be the role, well, then I have to make sure that role is continuing to do well and succeeding. Otherwise, I put myself in psychological danger.
That's so good, Richard. I really appreciate all your insights you've been sharing with us from a 2-page document called Toxic Factors in a Pastor's Role, and we've managed to eke out at least 45 minutes of a conversation around it, which is fantastic. So if anyone is in the Christchurch region, South Island, and you're looking, obviously, for a recommendation on someone to contact in regard to counselling, and I'd highly recommend from this conversation Mind Health with Richard Black here, who's been our guest. Richard, thank you for your time. Really appreciate that. And thank you for your insights.
No, my pleasure. And also, we access the whole of the country. We do online supervision and counselling as well, so that people can find us from any part of the globe.
That is fantastic. I didn't want to just squeeze you into the Christchurch locale, but now you've fixed that problem for me, so thank you.
Brilliant. Hey, it's been my pleasure. I love helping people to live their full life and to thrive in life. So this has been a joy. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks, Richard. Well, I hope you really enjoyed that insightful interview, and it was just like what we talked about. It was a 2-page document, 4 key points with a couple of paragraphs, but there is so much that we could learn from Richard. So again, like I've said, probably most weeks now, because there's so much in this, and if you're feeling a bit sort of burnt out like I've been, you can't process things really fast sometimes, go back and rewatch it. Look for those little gems you can get out of it. I actually wanted to grab, hopefully this is going to work. I'm just scrolling back through the comments. Here we go. We're going to see if this works. This is a great comment here from my mate Glennis. Good stuff, Lockie, but if I think it's supposed to be someone is really burnt out, would they be able to handle this? How do they, where do you start? Because throwing someone in front of a 45-minute interview with a Richard Black, is that really the best place to start? What I'd say is when someone's burnt out, and I've probably said this a lot of times, I'm going to keep saying it for the rest of my life now, you need to talk to somebody. Just someone that you can trust. And Richard brought that up a lot in the interview. You just need one person to talk to, not online, not in a Facebook forum, just one person face to face you can actually just talk to and be normal with. And I'd encourage anyone who's feeling burnt out, if you feel those symptoms that I mentioned at the beginning of the show match you, you either need to stop what you're doing or slow down dramatically. And those questions of who you are will come to the surface pretty quickly. Do not be afraid of that. It's all okay. I think it's more healthy to take a break in life and get healthy than it is to keep soldiering on like a cold drill ad and try and get through, because I did that for a long, long time, and eventually it bites you on the proverbial bottom and you get caught out, and then you have to rebuild your life a little bit more tricky than if you could do something like even what Richard was talking about. It's come up over the last few shows. If you're out there, seriously, if you're in a pastoring role or in some other role where you're responsible for leading people, or you recognize you just might need some help, I encourage you, before the battle becomes a big battle, get a supervisory counsellor. Have someone that you could talk to once a month. I love the fact that if you're a pastor out there and this has been of interest to you, Richard's put his hand up and said, hey, contact my organisation, we might be able to help you. Have someone that you can talk to so you can have some bounce off with somebody else. And that's part of, I guess, I don't want to ramble on too much before we finish the show. To prevent burnout, not just recognizing when it's all happened, to prevent burnout, you need to be a bit more clever about how you live life. And that's one thing I've learned a lot of. I've learned now, based on my experiences, to read my own, what's going on in my own heart and life a little bit better, try and filter the things that are going on, ask questions of myself about why am I reacting the way that I'm reacting. A supervisory counsellor or someone that you can trust, that you could talk to on a regular basis, like maybe every month, they will see things in you that you might not even see about yourself and might be even a little bit uncomfortable to bring up. But if they're a trusted person, then they have permission to speak into your life. They can help lead you to a better place. And if I have any regret over the last few years. It's probably, if I had a supervisory counsellor, I wonder whether I would be a different person than what I am right now. I don't regret the things that have happened to the nth degree. I've learned so much from it, and if I can be of help to any one of you out there, I count that a huge honour. I love the fact there's all these amazing comments going here. We've got Duncan Miller. He's brought up about the whole organisation discipleship thing. We could probably talk about that for ages. It's worth looking at the motivations for why we do certain things. And something I've been saying a lot to people recently is it's better to look at the outcomes you want than the roles you're going to do or the things you think you should do. If you know what you're trying to achieve, then you work things backwards there. I saw a comment a little bit earlier. Mark brought up how he'd worked under, I'll throw it on the screen so you can see it, so you've got all this fancy technology here, worked under managers who probably weren't human, certainly had no EI, which would be emotional intelligence. I think that's what Mark's working with. It's part of the challenge of life, isn't it? That there are sometimes people come into our lives we end up working with that might have their own challenges. And I would hope that maybe from exploring some of these issues from the show tonight, maybe that you don't instantly react when you recognize that someone else has got these challenges, but perhaps you have some empathy maybe for them. Maybe you could help them. You have to be wise of what you do, and I encourage you, don't overreact to everything you see when you learn or have a revelation, as they say, about it. If you work with some people that are damaging to your emotional, spiritual and physical health, then the right thing to do is begin to unpack yourself from that situation and find somewhere else to be, to work, to exist. But sometimes we have to learn some things, and being in those environments, just be wise and all that sort of stuff. I'll just quickly scan through, see if there's any other comments. Yep, people are going, great stuff. Thanks for sharing. Hey, really appreciate that, guys. Hey, we're going to wrap up now. The bit that you have been hanging around very patiently to the end, wondering what we're going to do on the show on the 22nd of December. It is unashamedly going to have well, I've already brought it up, a Christmas theme. No, we're not. I'm not going to just demonstrate Christmas masks. Sorry, that was upside down. We're going to do a Christmas version of the Real, Raw and Relevant show. So I've got a few ideas, which is going to be a bit of fun. And so it won't be mega serious. I'm not going to try and bring something emotional out of you for the last one. We need some joy and some hope in the season that we're in. And obviously we're all looking forward to the best summer we possibly can have, and you're going to be having a break. So I'm going to do a very Christmassy something special from my little studio here for you on the 22nd of October. So hopefully you can join us then. Right, just quickly on all the comments. Hey, thanks everybody for joining us. I love the fact you're putting hearts and ticks and all that sort of stuff. Please like, share, comment, all that sort of stuff. If you know someone who should watch this, get them to watch it. It'll do them some good. Hey, that's it for episode, where are we? We're number 7. Isn't that been cool? We're rocking along now. Thanks again to Richard Black for talking with us all, and thank you for joining me on your Wednesday night if you're part of the live show. Hope this makes a measure of difference in your life. Please look after yourself, and we'll see you again real soon. Lockie out. Goodbye.